Gemini twins, one white and one black, were abandoned at birth. Years later, they discovered the reason, a story that will leave you speechless, and what happens halfway through changes the ending completely. We would love to know which city you're watching this video from, so drop it in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all our content. It was a cold and rainy night when Lucas and Samuel were abandoned in front of the gates of São Sebastião Orphanage, a gloomy place on the outskirts of a big city, but far enough away to be almost forgotten. The orphanage's facade was decrepit, with gray, cracked walls reflecting the sadness of the children living there. Sister Maria, one of the caregivers, was the one who found them. When she saw the two newborn boys, she immediately noticed the contrast between them, Lucas, with his fair skin and blonde hair like the sun, and Samuel, with his deeply dark skin and eyes that seemed to reflect secrets hidden in the depths of the universe. The two babies were taken in, but the orphanage was far from a welcoming home. The place was poorly managed and neglected, with little food, hard beds, and an environment where human warmth practically did not exist. Even so, the brothers grew up together, inseparable, forming a bond that seemed unbreakable despite everything. They faced difficulties from an early age. The prejudice for being twins with such different appearances was a constant. Visitors to the orphanage, who came looking for children to adopt, looked at them strangely. Some even hesitated to believe they were blood brothers. Lucas, with his generous and hopeful heart, always believed that one day someone would see beyond appearances and adopt them together. He habitually awaited the next adoption visit with enthusiasm, hoping it would be the day they'd find a home. Samuel, on the other hand, grew increasingly suspicious. He understood the world more harshly, anticipating rejection even before it happened. His penetrating gaze, often described as frightening by the caregivers, was his form of protection. He knew that to survive in that place, he couldn't afford to have expectations. One day, when they turned 12, something changed. During an adoption visit, a mysterious woman named Helena appeared at the orphanage. Unlike the other visitors, she was not intimidated by the differences between Lucas and Samuel. When she looked at them, her face expressed something deeper, almost anguish mixed with recognition. Helena watched them from afar, as if she knew them. The visit was brief, but the brothers' curiosity was piqued. Who was that woman, and why did she seem to have a connection with them? Helena left without saying another word, and the brothers returned to their routine at the orphanage. However, something in her eyes continued to haunt Samuel. He felt that there was something hidden, something they didn't yet know about their own history. Lucas, optimistic as always, tried to calm his brother, saying that maybe Helena would come back to adopt them. Samuel, however, began to doubt. He knew there was more to that visit than just coincidence. The night was cold and damp, a fine mist beginning to cover the surroundings of São Sebastião Orphanage. The place, already carrying a gloomy atmosphere, seemed even more desolate under the pale light of the moon. Lucas and Samuel, now 12 years old, were used to the monotony and sadness of the orphanage, but Helena's recent visit had left both of them unsettled, especially Samuel, whose instincts were always sharper when something was wrong. Since Helena's appearance, Samuel couldn't stop thinking about her expression when she saw them. It wasn't the look of a typical visitor searching for an adoption. She watched them in a way Samuel couldn't quite define, but something inside him told him that this woman knew more than she let on. Lucas, with his usual optimism, believed Helena would return to adopt them. But Samuel, naturally skeptical, wasn't so convinced. He felt that there was something more hidden beneath the surface of that brief visit. That night, when everyone else in the orphanage was asleep, Samuel lay on his back in bed, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts spinning in his mind. Lucas was sound asleep, probably dreaming of fantasies about a happier future. But Samuel, no matter how hard he tried, couldn't ignore the feeling that there was something they didn't know, something that had been hidden from them. I need to know more. This thought hammered incessantly in Samuel's mind until he finally made a decision. With a quick and silent movement, he got out of bed, approached Lucas, and gently shook him until his brother woke up. "What is it, Samuel?" Lucas murmured, still drowsy. "Come on. We need to find out what's really going on here. I can't keep waiting for the answers to fall into our lap. Now." "It's late, Samuel," Lucas said, rubbing his eyes. But his brother's determined tone made him get up. Samuel led the way through the cold and silent corridors of the orphanage. The poorly lit building creaked with every step they took. They passed unnoticed by the caregivers sleeping in the night watch post, used to long hours of boredom and few interruptions. Samuel had already studied the orphanage's routine and knew that this was the perfect moment to explore. Samuel's goal was clear. He wanted to find the orphanage's old records, where he believed there might be something related to their abandonment. Why were they left there? Who were their real parents? And why had no one ever talked about them? These questions had haunted him for years, and he felt he was about to find at least part of the answers. The brothers reached the office of Sister Dolores, a severe and distant woman who rarely showed any sign of affection for the children. The door was locked, as always, but Samuel had learned a few tricks over the years. With a small hairpin he had found months earlier, he began to pick the lock, focused and determined. Lucas, always a bit more nervous in situations like this, glanced around, worried about the possibility of getting caught. "Samuel, do you think this is a good idea? What if we get caught?" "I need to know, Lucas. There's something about us they're hiding. Don't you want to know why we were left here? Don't you want to understand what happened to our family?" Lucas hesitated but knew his brother was right. He also felt the burning curiosity in his chest. Finally, after a few seconds that felt like an eternity, Samuel managed to unlock the door with a faint click. The two of them entered the director's dark and stuffy office. The place smelled old, of aged paper and humidity. In front of them, a large bookshelf filled with files and documents seemed to hold the secrets of decades of abandoned children in that orphanage. Samuel quickly went to the metal cabinets that seemed to contain the most important files. He began to rummage through drawers, looking for something related to the year they were left there. Lucas, still apprehensive, helped him look through the files, trying to make as little noise as possible. After a few minutes of frantic searching, Samuel finally found a folder marked with the year of their birth. "This is it," he said, holding the file with trembling hands. The two brothers sat on the floor, illuminating the document with a small flashlight Samuel always carried. Inside the folder, there was only a simple document, yellowed with age. It was their admission to the orphanage, but the information was scarce. It only stated that the two babies had been found at the orphanage's door on a rainy night, with no identification. There were no parents' names, no family history. Lucas, disappointed, sighed. "There's nothing here. We're just two more orphans with no history." But Samuel, with his always keener eye, noticed something peculiar at the bottom of the document. There was a small drawing, almost imperceptible, hand-drawn. A mysterious symbol that stood out among the formal letters, a circle with a vertical and horizontal line crossing its center, forming a kind of cross within the circle. Inside the circle, something vaguely resembling a map or an ancient emblem. "Look at this, Lucas," Samuel said, pointing to the symbol. "This isn't part of the standard form. This was drawn by hand, and it seems to have some meaning." Lucas looked at the symbol, intrigued. "What does it mean?" "I don't know," Samuel replied, his eyes fixed on the drawing. "But this isn't here by accident. It's like a mark, or maybe a clue." At that moment, the two brothers knew that this small discovery was much more important than it seemed. The symbol might be the key to understanding their true origin, something no one had ever told them. Determined to follow this lead, Samuel tucked the document inside his jacket, knowing he would need to study it further. Before they could continue exploring, they heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Startled, they quickly closed the drawer, turned off the flashlight, and quietly left the director's office, closing the door behind them. They returned to their rooms, hearts pounding, but now they carried a piece of the past, something that could change the course of their lives. As they lay back in their beds, Samuel couldn't stop staring at the symbol in the darkness. He knew this was just the beginning. Whatever was hidden in that symbol, someone else knew. Someone who perhaps didn't want them to discover the truth. The next morning, while having breakfast in the orphanage's cafeteria, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was Helena, the woman who had left the brothers intrigued days before. But this time, she didn't waste time with formalities. She approached Lucas and Samuel directly, with an expression of urgency. "You need to get out of here. Now." Helena's words were direct and frightening, as if she knew something terrible was about to happen. Whatever it was, the brothers knew that their search for the truth had just become much more dangerous. The gray afternoon seemed to mirror the tense atmosphere at São Sebastião Orphanage. Heavy clouds hovered over the place like a warning that something big was coming. Since Helena's visit, Lucas and Samuel couldn't go about their routine without the feeling of unease invading them at every moment. Who was that woman, and why did she seem so anguished when she looked at them? Samuel couldn't stop thinking that there was more to that visit, something that had yet to be revealed. In the days that followed, Samuel, always suspicious, began observing the orphanage's surroundings with unusual attention. He felt that something was about to happen, and Helena's presence seemed to have been just the first sign. Lucas, on the other hand, tried to maintain his optimism, convinced that Helena would return to adopt them and give them the life they had always dreamed of. But Samuel, with his usual skepticism, knew it was more than that. He sensed a threat in the air. Finally, on a cold and silent night, when everyone at the orphanage was asleep, Helena returned. The silence of the early hours was interrupted by a distant headlight approaching slowly, illuminating the worn facade of the orphanage. Samuel, who was lying awake in bed, heard the sound of the car and immediately got up, going to the window. When he saw Helena's familiar car, he knew it was time to act. "Lucas, wake up," Samuel whispered, shaking his brother, who was deeply asleep. Lucas blinked, confused. "What's going on? What's happening?" "She's here," Samuel said firmly. "Helena's back. I knew she wouldn't tell us everything during that visit. Something big is happening, and we have to find out what it is." Reluctantly, Lucas got out of bed, still half asleep, and followed his brother. They knew the orphanage was strictly monitored, and Sister Dolores, the authoritarian director, was extremely rigid about the rules. Escaping in the middle of the night was a huge risk, but Samuel was determined to find answers. He had already mentally mapped out a route that would lead them out of the building without being noticed. Walking silently through the cold, dark corridors of the orphanage, the brothers felt adrenaline coursing through their veins. The only light guiding them was the faint beam from a flashlight that Samuel kept hidden. They passed creaky doors, avoided one of the caregivers asleep in a chair in the hallway, and finally reached the exit door. Samuel, with the skills he had learned over the years from observing the world around him, knew how to unlock the old door without making a sound. As soon as they stepped onto the damp grass outside, Helena appeared on the other side of the fence, her coat hood covering part of her face. Her gaze was determined, but her expression carried a mix of urgency and guilt. "You need to leave now," Helena whispered, gesturing for them to approach quickly. "They know where you are. We don't have much time." Lucas and Samuel exchanged glances. What did she mean by they? Who are they? Samuel asked, always direct. Helena looked around as if afraid someone was watching. "I can't explain everything right now, but you're in danger. If you stay here, they'll find you. You need to trust me." Samuel was still skeptical, but there was something in Helena's eyes that convinced him to move forward. Without further questions, he and Lucas crossed the fence and ran to Helena's car, where she quickly seated them in the back. As she started the engine, Helena glanced at them in the rearview mirror, her eyes filled with concern. "Listen, I'm taking you to a safe place," she began as she accelerated down the dark road. "There's a lot you don't know, but I promise I'll explain everything." The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, the winding path lined with tall trees casting frightening shadows in the headlights. Lucas was nervous, but he still trusted Helena. He believed she was there to help them. Samuel, on the other hand, remained alert. Something about all of this felt out of control, and he didn't like the feeling of being kept in the dark. As Helena drove, she began to tell fragments of what she knew. She had been a friend of their mother, a woman who had to flee from a dangerous group shortly after the brothers were born. But before she could reveal more, something strange happened. A black car appeared in the rearview mirrors, approaching at a dangerous speed. "Damn it," Helena muttered, stepping hard on the gas. Lucas clutched the seat, his heart racing. "What's happening?" "They're following us," Helena said, her voice tense. "Hold on, this is going to get ugly." The black car began to accelerate, getting closer and closer. Helena took tight, dangerous turns to try to lose them, but the vehicle behind them seemed relentless. The trees rushed past the window, and the headlights of the pursuing car grew ever closer, like predator eyes fixed on their prey. Samuel looked at Helena, his mind racing with questions. "Who's chasing us? What do they want from us?" Helena responded with her eyes fixed on the road. "You two have something they want. Something you don't even know you have." Before she could elaborate, a violent crash hit the back of the car. Helena's vehicle skidded on the road, but she managed to regain control, if only just. However, the situation was becoming critical. Their pursuers were more determined than ever. "Get ready," Helena warned, her voice filled with urgency that made the two brothers grip the seat tightly. "I'm taking you to a cabin. It's the only safe place I know." She made a sharp left turn, veering onto a narrow dirt road that seemed to lead to nowhere. The trees around them closed in, creating a claustrophobic sensation. The black car continued to follow, but Helena was determined to reach the cabin before it was too late. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of tension and danger, Helena stopped in front of the isolated cabin. "Quick," she ordered. "Get inside before they catch up." The brothers ran into the cabin, with Helena following behind, closing the door with a loud bang. Inside, the silence was profound, except for the pounding hearts of the three of them. Lucas and Samuel were finally safe for the moment, but they knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would change their lives forever. Helena continued driving in silence, her eyes fixed on the dark, winding road leading to the isolated cabin. The car's engine seemed to be the only living thing around, while Lucas and Samuel, sitting in the back seat, exchanged anxious glances. The air inside the car was heavy with unanswered questions, but the fear of discovering something that could change everything kept them silent. When they finally arrived at the cabin, a small wooden structure in the middle of a dense forest, Helena abruptly stopped the car. She turned to the two brothers, her face pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "We need to talk, but not out here." "Let's go inside," Helena said, her voice low, almost trembling. Samuel and Lucas got out of the car, feeling the weight of the silent night around them. The cabin looked old, with its dusty windows and weathered wood, but there was something familiar about the place, something the brothers couldn't define. As they followed Helena to the cabin door, Lucas began to feel a slight chill down his spine. Samuel, more skeptical, remained quiet, but his mind was racing. He knew the answer to their questions was about to be revealed. Upon entering, the cabin enveloped them with the smell of old wood and moisture. The environment was dark, lit only by a fireplace that Helena quickly lit. The crackling of the fire was the only sound that broke the silence as they sat around a small wooden table, where Helena placed an aged envelope. She took a deep breath before speaking, as if gathering the courage to tell a story long kept secret. "You two have always known you were different," she began, looking directly at Samuel. "Since the day you were born, there's been something about you that attracts attention and fear. I was a friend of your mother, and I was there the day you came into this world. But it wasn't a normal birth." Lucas, always the optimist, interrupted, "Our mother. Why did she leave us? Where is she now?" Helena closed her eyes for a moment, as if reliving painful memories. "Your mother was an extraordinary woman, but the circumstances surrounding your birth forced her to make difficult choices. You weren't left at the orphanage because she didn't want you. On the contrary, she left you there because she needed to protect you." "Protect us from what?" Samuel asked, the skepticism in his voice growing. Helena looked deeply into his eyes. "You two are more than just brothers. There's something inside you, something the world doesn't understand and that certain people want to exploit. When you were born, there was a solar eclipse, a rare event that was foretold in an ancient prophecy. The prophecy speaks of two children, born at a moment when the sun and moon cross paths, who would have the power to alter the balance of the world, to choose between good and evil, between light and darkness." Samuel laughed bitterly. "That's crazy. Prophecies. Eclipses. That doesn't make any sense. We're just two boys who were abandoned at an orphanage." Helena didn't back down. "I know it sounds insane, but you need to believe me. Your appearances are the first sign. Lucas, you've always been the embodiment of light, hope, optimism. Samuel, you carry an inner darkness, but that doesn't mean you're evil. It just means there's a balance inside you. And that balance is what they want." Lucas, still processing, asked, "Who are they? Who wants us?" Helena hesitated before answering, her voice low and filled with fear. "There's an ancient organization, made up of people who have followed this prophecy for centuries. They believe that if they can control both of you, they can control the fate of the world. And now, they know where you are. I've hidden you at the orphanage for years, waiting for the right time. But now, time's up. They're coming." The silence in the cabin was deafening. Helena's words weighed heavily like a sentence, and Lucas felt fear taking root in his chest. Samuel, however, kept his cold facade, but inside, he was struggling with the wave of doubts and fear that began to overtake him. "Why now?" Samuel asked, trying to maintain control of the situation. "If you've known this all along, why didn't you tell us earlier?" Helena sighed, her shoulders seeming to sag under the weight of guilt. "I wanted to protect you. I thought that if you didn't know, you might have a chance to live a normal life. But now that they've found you, I can't hide the truth anymore. You need to be prepared for what's coming. And above all, you need to understand that the choice you'll make together will determine the fate of all of us." Helena's final words fell like a hammer on Lucas and Samuel. Whatever was coming, it wouldn't be a simple battle for survival. They carried a burden far greater than they could ever have imagined. That night, the brothers couldn't sleep. The warmth of the fireplace seemed distant as the weight of Helena's revelations sank into their minds. Lucas, always the more naive, tried to find meaning in her words. "If this is true, Samuel, if we're really that important, it explains a lot of things." Samuel, lying on the makeshift bed on the floor, stared at the ceiling, his hands behind his head. "It doesn't explain anything, Lucas. It just complicates everything. If everything Helena said is true, then we're in the middle of something much bigger than us. Lucas turned to his brother. And if we are? What if we can do something good with it? Samuel gave a dry laugh. You always think everything's going to end well, don't you? I don't know, Lucas. What she said about us, about me. I feel like there's something wrong inside me, something I can't control. Lucas, concerned, placed his hand on his brother's shoulder. You're not what these people say you are, Samuel. We're brothers, and that's what matters. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. Lucas' promise hung in the air, but Samuel's silence left a doubt. Could he really escape the darkness Helena said was inside him? As Helena tried to explain as much as she could, the brothers were still trying to process what she was saying. But before she could continue, a heavy knock echoed through the cabin. The tension skyrocketed immediately. Hide! Helena ordered, her face pale with terror. Lucas and Samuel ran to the small basement of the cabin, where they remained in complete silence. Outside, footsteps could be heard, a presence that seemed to carry an indescribable threat. Helena tried to face it alone. What do you want? She asked, her voice trembling. From the other side of the door, a cold voice responded, You know very well why I'm here, Helena. It's time for them to fulfill the destiny they were meant for. It was the hunter, a man who had been pursuing the prophecy for years. His motivations were obscure, but his methods were cruel. He knew the twins possessed immense power, and controlling them meant controlling something much greater. Helena did her best to throw the hunter off, but the door was broken down. The sound of the wood splintering made Lucas and Samuel tremble in the basement. They heard the fierce struggle above their heads, and the fear of losing the only person who seemed to know the truth about them consumed them. But before they could react, the silence returned. I'll find them, the hunter's voice echoed. Lucas and Samuel escaped the cabin through a secret passage Helena had prepared, aware that the danger was closing in. Not knowing what to do but certain that the hunter was on their heels, the brothers ran through the forest, searching for refuge. Every step was accompanied by a chill down their spines, and the feeling of being watched. After hours of walking, they stumbled upon a small village, hidden and seemingly forgotten by time. There, they met Miguel, a middle-aged man who seemed to know more than he was willing to share. He took them in but made it clear that he was aware of the importance of their journey. You have a destiny to fulfill, he said. And I'll help you, but we'll need more allies. Miguel was a former member of a secret order, formed centuries ago to protect those involved in the prophecy. He began to teach Lucas and Samuel the skills they would need to face what was coming. Samuel, who had always been more reserved and resistant, felt a strange connection to the darkness surrounding him. Lucas, on the other hand, was naturally inclined to the brighter and more hopeful side. Over time, Miguel trained them for the imminent battle. But there were more questions than answers. Why were they so important? What exactly did the hunter want with them? As Miguel continued the preparations, a new revelation came to light. Samuel began having strange visions at night. In one of them, he saw a mysterious woman who called him my son. Confused, he shared this with Lucas, and the two began to suspect that the truth about their biological mother had not yet been fully revealed. Eventually, Miguel decided to share what he knew. Your mother wasn't an ordinary person, he began. She was part of an ancient lineage of guardians of the prophecy. She carried the blood of those with the power to influence the world's fate. Lucas and Samuel were shocked by the information. Everything they had known about their lives up until that point was shattered. Their mother hadn't abandoned them because she didn't want them. She had been protecting them from the greatest danger they had ever faced. And now, that danger was closing in fast. Finally, the day of the confrontation arrived. The hunter and his forces were approaching the village. Miguel had gathered other members of the order to help them, but he knew that the real battle lay in the hearts of the brothers. They would have to accept who they were to unleash the power that would make them invincible. Lucas, always the optimist, believed he could defeat evil with his innate goodness. Samuel, however, struggled with the darkness within him. Their fate depended on their unity, but the tension between their contrasting personalities began to escalate. When the hunter finally confronted them, he revealed a shocking truth. Samuel was the son of a dark being, the bearer of darkness, while Lucas was the son of light. They were perfect opposites, and the hunter wanted to merge these forces to control the world's balance. The revelation shattered what little innocence Samuel had left. He couldn't believe that his own blood contained the forces of darkness, and Lucas was devastated to realize that his brother was torn between two worlds. The battle between the hunter and the brothers was fierce. Miguel and the other members of the order did their best to protect the village, but it was clear that this fight could only be decided by Lucas and Samuel. The power the hunters so desperately wanted depended on one crucial choice. The brothers would have to decide whether to unite their forces or fight each other. Lucas, believing in the unconditional love he had always shared with Samuel, reached out to his brother. "I know who you are," he said. "And you're more than the darkness inside you. We're brothers. Together, we can overcome this." Samuel, however, felt the weight of the darkness growing inside him. The hunter taunted him, saying he would never be free of the shadow that followed him. What would Samuel do? Would he choose to fight alongside his brother, or would he succumb to the fate the hunter had laid out for him? In the decisive moment, Samuel made his choice. He looked at Lucas, his eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted this," he said. "But maybe the only way to save you is to surrender to the darkness." And then, Samuel did the unthinkable. He launched himself at the hunter, embracing the dark power within him, but with a different purpose. He wasn't surrendering to the darkness, he was using it to destroy the hunter himself. Samuel's sacrifice was the ultimate act of love, and Lucas watched, heartbroken, as his brother disintegrated along with the hunter, taking with him all the darkness that threatened the world.